Okay. Okay, fine.
They should be in short. In the next like 2 minutes, we can start.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Si casa de la madre 17 side.
Chairperson, I think we can start.
Okay, thanks a lot, John. Good morning, members. It's a pleasure to be online with you after a long while. You are most welcome to this webinar. We have 2 hours ahead of us, and let me start by introducing our first speaker today, our first presenter, Fenard Katatumba. Fenard holds a BBA in marketing major and a postgraduate diploma in human resource. And he also holds a master's degree of human resource management from Makerere University, Kampala. He is currently a human resource manager at the National Environment Management Authority, that is NEMA. And he has held similar positions in organizations such as UBC, WBSTV, and Fishways earlier on. Fenard Katatumba has vast experience and expertise in human resource management and also marketing. As you can see from the presentation, he has held some positions earlier on, like chairman Ibanda Kampala Catholic Association, the chairman of Kitabi Seminary All Boys Association, the chairman of St. Joseph's Vocational All Boys Association, member Mbarara Archdiocese Pastoral Commission, and chairman Appointments Board of University of St. Joseph's Mbarara. He's passionate about community service and has a passion for the environment too. And his hobbies include listening to classical music, Italian music. This is an interesting one. I don't know how many Ugandans have interest in Italian music. It's an interesting one. He's also a linguist who practices that as a hobby, and he speaks French and a bit of Italian. So ladies and gentlemen, as I said, Fenard rather will be speaking for the next 30 minutes, and let us please pay attention. Let's keep order. Let's mute our speakers if we are not speaking or not required to speak, so we can have the flow of the communication properly. You know, communication now is a very vital thing in the new world order. COVID has made us do more of remote work than office work, and communication is critical. So please let us pay attention as Fenard goes through the topic. Thanks. Fenard, you are welcome. Please proceed. Fenard.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. And thank you for that brief introduction. And I'm also glad to be here to present to members of the fraternity of the Certified Public Accountants. Having presented the same paper about 10 years ago, I thank management for giving me this opportunity to present to members. That one notwithstanding, the time that has been allocated to me, I will make sure that I finish the presentation immediately and within the appropriate time. As management has set the topic of effective communication in organization, you know, I will start right away. This will be my outline of my presentation. Why is communication very important? I will also talk about the standard operating procedures, the methods of communication, the prerequisite for remote working, and the checklists, and tips for remote working. And I will also talk about the challenges of remote working. And then I will give my recommendations and I conclude. By definition, communication is the process of transmitting and sharing ideas, opinions, facts, and information in a manner that is effectively perceived and understood. If in communication, if you don't perceive it and understand it, it cannot be an effective communication. That basically entails what communication is, and after communicating, we need to know what are the elements of communication. In the elements of communication, for any communication, there must be a sender. Whom are you sending the message? There must be the message where you are sending the message. The message you are sending must be translated. In this COVID, must be translated. We should know which medium of communication have you chosen to communicate the message, and who is going to receive that message. And when he receives that message, how will he translate that message? And after translating that message, what action can he take? And then after taking the action, he gives you a feedback. Though those are some of the elements of communication. And for effective communication, every communication must be clearly understood, whether from top or down, whether you're communicating from the superiors or you're communicating from support staff to management. The information that one has to communicate must be complete. If it is not complete, then it becomes vague. People cannot understand. The receivers cannot understand it. There is a need to use correct language, and such that the correct language you have used should easily be understood. And when the correct language has been understood, you have to systematically present it to the staff or to the recipients who are doing. And then you have to think, have the message which I've transmitted, is it sincere? Does it interest others? And what will be the after effects of what I have done? And for staff, as staff, most of you members are in different organizations. What needs to be communicated to staff, like in human resource, there is a necessity that when you are communicating with staff, you must communicate the terms and conditions of employment. We are in COVID, we have been locked down. The terms and conditions, how will people be paid? What will be the outcome of people staying home? What will be the challenges that we'll be facing? So we need to know the terms and conditions of employment when in this period. And then staff must know what they're expected to do. You have taken them outside. They are not in offices. What are they expected to do? Are they expected to go in, and sleep? Are they expected to go in their farmlands? Are they expected to be on computers? So there is a necessity that staff must be told what they are expected to do. Thirdly, there must be learning and development opportunities. Are you in lockdown? What are the opportunities that are there? Learning different issues, learning different aspects. So what should somebody know? That what am I going to gain from X? What am I going to gain for Y? There you have to know the objectives of the institution. Why are the objectives? Why was the institution set up? What were its aims of its setup? And what are the strategies that the organization is going to have in order to coexist with that organization? We have also to communicate the performance of the organization. Once the organization is performing well, many will know that they have a future with them. So staff need to be communicated how is the performance of the organization. The proposed changes to conditions of employment. Most of our friends have lost jobs. So you need to communicate. What are the proposed changes? People working from home, what are the proposed changes that staff will have to do in order to have effective employment? The working arrangements, working in shifts, working in days, working in hours, all those have to be communicated with staff. Work-life balance, there is life after our hours of work. There is life after 5. How should one balance his life vis-a-vis the work he's being assigned? And once you have done that one, you need to regularly update staff of what is taking place. So, during lockdown, there were standard operating procedures that most institutions are assimilated to, and in the process, each organization identified a skeleton staff who remained on duty. After His Excellency the President had announced the lockdown, each organization was asked to identify the skeleton staff that will remain on duty. And those staff who remained there were to avoid any physical contacts. And those physical contacts, there was physical interaction with clients was to be limited, such that people do not get that coronavirus. Vital contacts, such as emails, phone numbers, and other electronic media, was got from staff to enable them have limited interactions. Most people are not used to scanning. We use now electronic documents. Correspondence was now encouraged. You scan and send a document on email, such that the recipient receives it immediately. Then, staff who are retained at offices were asked to observe regular hand washing and sanitization, and it's all been done. So, immediate contacts in case of suspected infections were established. So, in most institutions, as the coronavirus took height, so immediate contacts of the CEOs, of the heads of human resource, of the heads of finance were also done to make sure that were established to make sure that the staff, in case of any problem, they get in touch with them. So in that communication, the communication was either written or spoken. The communication has been direct. First, individuals or groups were told what is going to do. Consultative committees were established, and supplementary written materials on intranet communication, whereby information has been important and complex, were done. And then the use of news staff letters and magazines were done to communicate that what is taking place in respect of the coronavirus and the lockdown. So, as after communicating all this, as our topic, so now, when all those have been communicated since March and up to date, now there came the issue of working from home. What are the prerequisites of remote working? After the coronavirus, I can say the new nomenclature was established of remote working. Most people are very adamant of working from home. So our remote working is a work arrangement in which some of not all his work is performed from home or to another site location. So, as staff, as members of different institutions, there is a need to understand why remote working is very paramount. So, for any institutions, the remote working has to be promoted in this COVID virus to make sure that the arrangement of delivery is improved. Now, after another prerequisite of remote working, which factors should organization consider when determining if remote working is possible? We have to know the operational requirements. What do we require for us to work from home? What do staff require for them to work from home? There is the issue of the security of work data. Most of the data that we have been using is from the information and data is from officers, not access to public. So how is the security of the work and the data and the information that members will be, that staff will be accessing, and the data that it does not go to the competitors? The technological capabilities and the equipment necessary to perform job duties. In remote working, there are equipment that is needed, laptops, for mobile phones, smartphones, modems. So all those need to be put in consideration of staff to work from home. And when the staff is working from home, how productive is he or she? And if he's working from home, what accurate record is reflecting the work by those in exempt staff? And number 3, which jobs are suited for remote work? There are those tasks that require reading, writing, and research, and working data or talking on phone. So, are they required to remotely work, or are supposed to be open offices? Which jobs are not suited for remote work? For example, those that require personal contact and customer service, are they supposed to work from remotely or not? And then, what is the most important for starting a productive remote work arrangement? Management here should articulate that there are clear procedures, standard operating procedures regarding check-in time and hours of availability for staff, whether they are available or not available. And all this requires proper planning. Because without proper planning, there cannot be any movement. Next. So, management, there should be, these are the management checklists for supporting remote work. You said you are working from home, but what are the checklists what management should put in consideration? Number 1, review of technology and needs and resources. Management should confirm that staff know how to set up available gadgets. Some staff who don't know, because now we are in other generations. People are not, some of them, some who are born before computers, they don't know how to set up these gadgets. So they need to, for management to confirm and know whether these available gadgets, like now Zooming, like if people even don't know how to even talk on phone, although they have smartphones. So they need to confirm them. You need to determine which platforms you will use at management by clarifying the expectations for the availability. There should be set platforms by management that are communicated to all staff to see how they can share the information. You need to test and confirm that everyone has access to and proficiency with technology tools like Skype, Zoom, even mobile phones, even network. In Kampala, there are some places where you don't have network. So you need to review, as you review the technology, you have to confirm that everybody has access to the technology available. You need to ensure that there is alternative work safely. You cannot just say, go and work, but you say, where person stays in Kamoja, is it safe or not safe? And consider potential technology needs like internet, access to computers, and secure shared locations. So the potential technology needs are very paramount. Number two, you need to review the work schedule. How do you review the work schedule? There should be clear expectations from staff. There are some institutions and organizations which have field operations. Field operation staff should continue to work as there is work available. Then those who are at the office, then they can just alternate. But those field operations have to continue to make sure that the operations of various institutions keep on running. Number three, they must have a work plan. Management needs to highlight on the routine tasks that cannot be fulfilled while working remotely. There is a need to determine the root tasks that require regular communications. Management has to identify individuals with vast experience. And as you have a work plan, you need also to train your staff on how these remote workings and the technology and gadgets that are available. Staff have to be taught, have to be taken through and trained how these things are supposed to run. After that, you have to agree on the strategic priorities during this time. Because if you don't agree, there will be collusion on how these priorities can be achieved. But as management, there is a need to agree on the strategic objectives. And management has to provide resources and technical support. Remote working cannot come on a silver platter. The resources have to be provided. Staff have to be given laptops, have to be given tablets, have to be, because now they'll no longer be working from the desktops. Now they'll be mobile. Even their mobile phones have to have their time. And after that, you make a communication and accountability plan. Supervisors should tell staff on how often they should send the updates. Is it on a daily basis? Is it on an hourly basis? Is it on a weekly basis? So that one has to be agreed upon. There should be regular check-ins. And although staff will work from home, regular check-ins, what are you doing? Zooming, what is this one? And then interaction. So those check-ins, they can, now you know what staff is doing, where he has reached, what challenges he's facing, or what stress he has. So after that, you should be preparing an emergency communication plan. In case now you want to get to communicate to somebody and then he's off the network, what happens? There should be that communication plan. Management needs to be positive. There should be a positive attitude and willingness to trust staff to effectively work remotely and embrace technological options. Because unless there is that positive attitude, all what staff do, or what people do, will be shut down. And then there is a need to re-emphasize a focus on measuring results. When the focus on measuring results is done, then it will be good. Then after that, they need for a debrief after normal operation resume. Supervisors and staff should review work plans when work returns to normal. After our reviewing it, they should also assess the progress. After assessing the progress, they should prioritize any unresolved or new work that resulted from temporary disruptions. So once that one is done, it becomes now easier for see what the staff are supposed to do. So I just now go on the tips on working remotely. There is a need to define your workspace. You are not supposed to work from a kitchen when you are at home. You say you design, say I'm going to work from either under the tree, if you have a tree, or you're going to work under the on my bed in my living room. So staff and employees need to define their workspace. They need to master the basics. There are basics when you are working from home. For example, information you have, the gadgets, make sure that you have even the available network. Staff need to state their daily goals, track them, and share their progress. Then they should eliminate any distraction when you are working from home. It doesn't mean that you put on music high. It doesn't mean that children will come and cry in view. So they need to eliminate distractions. Prioritize your privacy. When you are doing office work, when you are at home, you constitute yourself with your computer separate so that now you have gazetted your living room or your bedroom to be your office. So prioritize privacy. Be secure. Don't just talk when you are at home and then you make sure that everybody knows that he has brought in computers, he has voluminous documents which are very confidential. Thieves can come and then take them. So be secure and always stay connected on these networks. So what are the effects of working remotely? Accordingly, working from office is likely to become the status symbol. I'm going to office, but most of the work now will be done at your homes. Many employees will split their times between working from home and their corporate office. So you say, now I'm going to work from Kamocha, then my home is in Makerere, there will be time going to Makerere and now time going to Kamocha. So there will be split time of working from home and corporate offices. Most meetings could be replaced by emails, and more emails will become instant messages. So there is no need of saying now we're going for a meeting. It's a matter of sending emails, provided you are on the same platform, and the message will be instantly received. For team members who no longer work together, this could help build trust among employees who cannot interact in person. Because now these people working remotely, there are sometimes, in our boardrooms where say, I don't want to sit next to manager Y, I don't want to see director Z. So there will be no working together, but this will build trust. When I'm at home and somebody else at his home, that trust is said he's also working, Now, organizations will also cut travel costs and balance their travel budgets. This time of saying that I'm going to present a paper in Nairobi, you take the whole per diem, you take now the whole day traveling, you're going to be sitting on your computer in your bedroom or in your living room or under your balcony and state the information. Office buildings could become elaborate conference centers. Now we're only becoming with offices for meetings. Lowering rent costs by acquiring little rent space. When you have been occupying, let's say, 100 square meters, now if most staff are working from home, it would mean now they have to reduce on the area of rent, and then that one will be saving money to the institution. More touchless fixtures such as door sensors, automatic sinks, dispensers, and voice active elevators are likely now to come because everybody fears to touch the gadget. So everything will be touchless, just to be standing and they sense you and then they open. Employers will set expectations from when they need every staff in office, online, or for staff meetings and other team activities. That one is likely to take place. And this, more important, so it will allow more women to remain in the workplaces while balancing home and work. Some women have been removed, leaving jobs because you see, I have to look after my children, I have to do what. But now, working from home, there is a record that now most of our colleagues, the ladies will now say, let me remain on work since I can work from home. Then work culture would also create more equity, both as most men and women will spend more time. So just go behind. So another one effect. Next. Another outcome will be mental health care of staff. People are not used to staying at home. People are stressed. Domestic violence will come in. You'll find staff almost even talking, you find the staff talking in the corridors around. So as management, there is a need for mental health care of staff. What challenges are we likely to encounter next? You see how man is confused. These are the challenges. Very many questions. Adoption of telecommunication by telecommuting by some organization. Some organization are not prepared to adopt this telecommuting. They see it as something for extravagance. So adopting the new telecommunicating is also a challenge. Who is eligible to work from home? That is also another challenge. Does manager Y or officer Z or director X? So who is eligible? Technological support. You have said work from home. I don't have a laptop. I don't have data. I don't have a modem. So how do you expect me to work from home? Insecurity of information. Most of our information is likely to be secure. How do you know? How do you know that I'm secure? Confidentiality of information. Now, like accountants, most of them will be taking the voucher at home. So you say they are paying X certain amount. So how would that confidentiality of information be maintained? How do you hold the staff accountable? I am in Makerere. The head office are in Uganda. How do you hold me accountable? Health and safety in physical environment. As I've mentioned above, most staff are depressed. You might find that today he has not even money for lunch, but you expect him to work. He's at home, but you don't know what goes behind the four walls. It becomes a problem. Network challenges. Even in Kampala here, our service provider, there are challenges with networks. Then the cost involved in procurement of this equipment. This pandemic came as a result of it came in the third quarter of the financial year, and most of the institutions are not blessed to embrace the change. We also have the Millennium Challenge. The Millennium Challenge, you have the baby boomers, those who are born before 1965. Yeah. So how will the baby boomers embrace that change? How will the Generation X embrace change? Because they are literate, they are low staff, but they are very unpredictable. And we have those the millennials. They have grown up and been the studies of the media and the technology. They are confident and desire freedom, but are afraid to experiment. They are not used to working from home. So accordingly, it is recommended that we need institutions, organizations need to prioritize budgeting for IT data and equipment. We need to reorient the mindset and perception of staff. Most of them don't even take leave. Now you are saying you are working from home, so they need to be oriented. Continuous capacity enhancement of staff is very paramount. Then they need to provide IT support. Now the role of the IT department's IT section of supporting staff remotely from their homes is very paramount. All staff and clients should continue washing their hands and be sanitized before accessing offices. It's not something that is going to be done, but it should be a continuous process. All staff should have their temperatures measured before accessing office premises. This one is now for health, to make sure that staff stay healthy. All access doors should be kept wide open. This thing of closing open for me, you don't know where it's touched. They should be open. Let's not maintain the social distancing when we are in COVID, but the social distancing needs to be maintained. Accordingly, communication is a journey. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn and relearn. And finally, sometimes the chains that prevent us from being free and progressing are more mental than physical. That's why COVID has made us rich. I thank you very much, viewers, and may God bless you for God and my country.
Thank you so much for that very able presentation, Fenard. I do hope that all the members have understood and have been following very well. I do hope all have a clear networks they're using and they're understanding everything. So Fenard has gone through quite some things, talk about effective communication, talking about seeing things like the prerequisites for working from home, emergency communication plans, measuring the effectiveness of communication. I think all these are very, very critical things when we talk about communication. If I may give you one quote, there's a gentleman by the name George Bernard Shaw, who one time said that the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. So normally people communicate and have the illusion that they have communicated when they have not. And if you check 2-3 steps down the road, you realize that the communication was not effective. And that is why Bernard was taking us through some vital things to ensure that communication is effective. John Powell also mentioned, a gentleman in the US, that communication works for those who work at it. So as CPA members and other people joining this meeting, communication requires some work, some effort. Without that, we may not actually be communicating. Thank you so much, Fenard. We will proceed directly to take the second presentation from Barbara, which presentation should take us about 50 minutes up to around 12:30, and then we will have 30 minutes after that for questions and answers. Just a word of advice, there are people posting on the question and answer slot just comments. If you're just putting other comments, general comments, not questions, please try and use the chat function. But if you have genuine questions that you need to be attended to by the panelists and any other members, please post it in the question and answer slot. Thank you very, very much. So permit me to introduce to you Ms. Barbra Arimi. Barbara is the head of marketing and communications at the NSSF. She also serves on the DFCU group board, and she is CEO Apprenticeship Alumni Board. Barbara has over 16 years experience in marketing and communications in the financial industry. She's a member of the Chartered Institute of Marketing and Chartered Institute of Public Relations. Barbara has a master's degree in business administration from ESAMI. ESAMI, or many of us know ESAMI, is Eastern and Southern African Management Institute. She also has a Bachelor of Commerce degree specializing in marketing from Makerere University, Kampala. Please join me in welcoming Barbara to this presentation. As I've already said, she will present for about 50 minutes, and after that, we will then have a question and answer session that will push us up to 1 o'clock at the time to close this session. You are welcome, Barbara. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me clearly. If you can just perhaps post, indicate by posting within the comment section. And I might not need all the 50 minutes because I have only 6 slides. So I may not use all the 50 minutes, but
no problem, Barbara. Just proceed. We will see how to utilize the remaining time. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. I decided to take kind of a practical approach to this session, and I will talk about communication as a process, and then the trends that I see developing and actually during and post-COVID that are impacting on communication. And then just take a case of Starbucks with a case recently an internal communication that went bad and what they did about it. And then also look at the case of Coca-Cola and their CSR donation and what they did about it. And then just share some nuggets about what NSSF is doing, especially in the COVID era. I must say that Fenard has been very comprehensive. And of course, with that backdrop, we are now really better placed to look at communication at work and look at some practical aspects of communication. So we need to first appreciate that communication is a process. For every communication that you want to send out, it's a process. And I know that most of us are involved in strategy, and we always see strategy as a process. And just like strategy, communication is a strategic process. So for every communication, we first need to understand what is the situation. And understanding the situation, of course, involves analyzing your environment using the same tools that we usually use, the pastels, the SWOT, just to define what the problem is. Because when you define your communication problem, then you're in position to actually come up with a strategy to address the problem that you have identified. Now, the first thing, like we said, is what is happening, what is your situation? That's a situation analysis. The next thing that is usually done is your strategy. What should we say? How should we say it? And why? You know? And after you've come up with your messaging, that is what you should say, and then you need to now progress into implementation of that. And that is now when you look at how and when. Timing is very critical. When is also very critical. Who should say it is also very critical. In certain instances, you'll find that it's not the PR person who should speak. Maybe in some instances, you might need to solicit support from even your chairman of the board or other external stakeholders to actually speak on your behalf. So this is really what I just want us to look at, you know, the context of communication. And then of course, after every communication, it's important that we evaluate and ask ourselves, how did we do? Did we actually achieve what we set out to communicate? And oftentimes, of course, because of that feedback, you can easily pick the feedback from various points of views, from your customers, or even better still nowadays with social media, you can easily pick all this feedback through your trend analysis. Now, since we've already established that communication is a process, I just want us to move on to the next slide. Like I said, I just have 6 slides. So the first one is done. We are going to move on to the communication trends during and post-COVID. Now, from a communication point of view, we can see that the landscape is changing. Instead of the literacy style that we are used to, the communication is evolving into more visual communication. We can see brands are continuously now using videos, short clips, of course, adverts. And this really is because the communication style is changing. And also it ties in with the fact that the population is much younger, especially in Uganda, where 70% of the population is below 30. So we see that communication is more fluid, it's more visual, and that means that even on, if, for example, on digital media, you see that the communication actually, I would say, expires much faster. So you can see that in 2018, YouTube had about 1.3 billion viewers and users, but now that number is 2 billion. And that just attests to you that more and more we are seeing that even with this era, communication is becoming more visual. And I think you have also noticed from the various communication that brands have put out, Ministry of Health, on their social media, that it's more about visual and less about the literacy style. The other thing the other trend that I see during this time is that, of course, there is increased digital media usage. We can see that during the lockdown, New Vision launched a new platform, which basically was their e-platform. And now you could just log on and access the full newspaper, you know, just using your phone or tab or laptop. Secondly, you can see also Monitor did a rebrand on e-media, and we've seen that several media houses are breaking the news on media. Even for the presidential address, you would have to just watch out for his Twitter handle and know that, okay, the president is going to make a speech or something. So there's an increased reliance on digital media as basically a communication platform. And of course, that is supported also by the increased internet penetration in Uganda. We see internet penetration has gone up to 37.6%. We can see that globally, there are so many people on social media. Facebook already has 2.6 billion. And this increased digital media usage also comes with a few challenges. You can see that now there's internet mob justice. Something begins basically on internet, on social media, and a brand actually lands in trouble. So this is really, and even from the fund side, we can see that just in the month of May, our online audience grew by 34%. So this shows you that this is a trend that is with us during COVID, and even post-COVID, digital media usage is going up. Another thing that of course has been happening but is going to increase with the increased usage of digital and people being online. You have an email address, you have a YouTube channel, you have a Facebook account, you're on Twitter. You find that you are surfing using the net. You find that there's a lot of data being created. And this data is actually very relevant for brands, because at the tail end, there's a lot of machine learning, and people are now having opportunities to target customers very specifically and just telling them this, because oftentimes, for example, if you go to YouTube and then you listen to a gospel song or whatever you do, or check out an ad, you'll find that, or listen to a motivational speech, you'll find that the next time you are again given a similar topic to listen to. That is all because of big data and artificial intelligence, things that actually now we have an opportunity to leverage it onto to actually improve on our communication to our customers and to our staff as well. The fourth trend that I see is basically, the fourth trend that I see is, again, the digital platforms that were being used actually for service delivery are now actually getting converted into avenues for actually service delivery, from communication to service delivery. So that line between a communication channel and a service channel is actually narrowing. It's becoming smaller. We see we all are on WhatsApp, and now WhatsApp actually has launched a payment platform in Brazil. You know, so you can actually just within the app make payments as well. Secondly, we can see that, of course, all these websites, Facebook, are now becoming avenues for service delivery for most companies. And of course, with that, we realize there's also an aspect of automation within the digital platforms. And we are increasingly seeing that companies are now beginning to have chatbots and automating many of their customer service. The obvious questions are being automated. So these are the accelerated changes that we are seeing in the communication landscape now, actually during COVID and post-COVID. Communication is more visual, there's increased digital usage, the opportunities presented by artificial intelligence and big data, and also the opportunities presented by actually organizations now having to marry their communication platforms and leverage on those for service delivery. So in a nutshell, really, that is our landscape. And I thought the first two slides are setting the pace. Communication is a process, and now we have a changing landscape because of what is happening within the COVID. Now, like I said earlier, I would like us to look at just some practical aspects of communication. And just in the recent past, a case of an internal communication, and I saw within the question feed, someone talked about leaked communication. So of course we know that it was rather unfortunate that George Floyd died in police custody. And of course that sparked some protests in the US and other countries. And of course accelerated Black Lives Matter movement. Now, a brand, a strong brand that we all know, Starbucks, you know, showed support for, you know, the Black Lives movement and empathized with really, you know, the death of George Floyd. However, they issued an internal memo to their employees, you know, banning them from wearing the Black Lives Matter apparel. And so you see that this memo actually goes to the public, yeah? And Starbucks was going to have a run because now people were saying, let us actually abolish Starbucks. Let's not take Starbucks coffee during this time. And so what did Starbucks do? Starbucks had to issue another internal memo and make it public to actually just show that they support, and they even pledged to purchase the apparel for their staff. So this is an aspect of internal communication that actually almost costed the brand, you know, its reputation and its sales and profits as well. So why did I borrow from this case? Because I just wanted to share with us how actually internal communication, if it's not well managed during this time, can actually negatively impact on your brand. So what are the key lessons here? The key lessons, the first one is your context matters. Your communication context matters. And I think from the first slide that I shared, I talked about the context. What is happening now? So for every single time when you want to communicate, even to your staff, it's very important that you have an appreciation of your context. You should always have that in mind. And more importantly, there's now a very thin line, and because of the developments we talked about, increased digital media usage. And one of the things that comes with the digital media usage is the fact that every single person is a publisher. The right to publish is in the hands of everyone. So that means that even when you issue a communication to your staff, you need to realize that there's a very thin line between internal communication and external, because every single person is now a publisher, and any communication can easily get into the hands of the wrong person. So your context matters, that's number one. Two, there's that very thin line. Three, one of the things I saw with Starbucks, they were able to allow for flexibility. When they realized that they actually had made a mistake and they had underrated the Black Lives Matter movement, they decided to retract and say they show their support, and they even purchased the apparel. Now, that is the flexibility that is required within communication. If you realize that actually you did something wrong, it's better to retract instead of towing that line continuously and then hitting actually a snag and causing more damage to your organization. The other thing with the Starbucks case, we realize that staff are actually your brand ambassadors. And so it's very critical that people should sell to their staff. Whatever mandate you have, whatever agenda you have, it's very critical that you sell to your staff your position before actually selling the position to the public. And of course, something that I have consistently talked about with that example is the fact that communication, even to internal stakeholders, can damage your brand image and cost your business. And lastly, a key lesson there is continuous engagement with your teams is very, very critical, even during this time, during the COVID and the post-COVID. So this is really an example that I wanted us to look at within the internal context. As we communicate internally, what should we be cognizant of? Yeah. And then I also wanted us to look at another case of external communication. And I know that this one, all of us saw it happening. And this was really a case whereby, of course, we all know that during COVID, His Excellency asked companies to donate, and many companies stepped forward to donate. Now, during one of the weekly briefings, he announced that Pepsi Cola had donated $200,000 US, but also Coca-Cola was on the list and they had donated 187 empty jerry cans. Yeah. Now, what was the result? The result was a public outcry, and online people began to say ebidomola, you know, and to say there was actually a bidomola challenge, you know, and challenging actually Coca-Cola and making fun of the donation. So what did actually Coca-Cola do? They understood the context and they realized that there was a communication gap. So they engaged with the Ministry of Health, and they got actually the Ministry of Health to actually clarify that Coca-Cola had given more, you know, they had given actually more than the 187 empty jerry cans, which was a good move. And that feeds into also what I talked about in the beginning, that communication is a process. And sometimes you need to ask yourself, who should say what for what effect? So we can see that Coca-Cola needed other people to come and speak and say, no, we are aware that Coca-Cola actually did much more than that. And the right people who were actually the recipients of the donation came out and said that the PS actually came and said, no, they did that. And also we see that the next step Coca-Cola did was to engage their CEO and HR to clarify. So the CEO came and said, no, we gave much more, and said how they had been supporting from the onset. But their HR also came and put a human face to it. They also talked about how they had actually supported their staff during the pandemic. And all this actually was majorly on social media. And there's another smart move that Coca-Cola did. They actually decided to, if you look at the picture on your right, they decided to ride the wave, you know, on social media, because sometimes social media is more about emotions. And so these people decided to ride the wave by joining the Bidomola challenge and saying there are more than 187 million ways to use your Chidomola. So this is all about strategy. What is your context? What is going wrong? What message should we put out there? Who should be the right person to say your message? And which channels should we use? But very interestingly, Coca-Cola Africa actually came on and donated 1.3 billion to the COVID National Task Force. And so we are seeing how communication within organizations is very ingrained in the fabric of your organization. So what are the key learnings? If we look at Coca-Cola and its donation, what are the key learnings from a communication point of view? Now, first of all, the first thing is that your CSR, your corporate social responsibility, actually communicates, yeah? And we can see that when Coca-Cola announced the 187 and the $20,000 and their competitor had announced $200,000, it actually communicated something to the Ugandans, yeah? And so that is one thing. Whatever CSR you step out to do, even on the communication front, during times like this, you are communicating. Secondly, I liked the way Coca-Cola handled their issue. They nabbed the issue in the bud before it became a crisis. And they were quick to act and actually quick to demonstrate by even stepping up their donation. And the third thing is, of course, context. Your context, like we said, matters a lot. What was the context? You know, before you go out there to say anything, whether it's internal or external, what is your communication context? If you know that actually at this point, the president is saying, we want cars. The Ministry of Health is saying they are not testing kits. You know, much as there was a message about washing hands, it appeared on the lower end of the pyramid, you know. So context, as a communication person, as a finance person, it's very important to understand the context of your communication before you actually step out and communicate. And then another key lesson, and this is what I have already talked about, your messaging and the messenger are very important. Who says what, to whom, for what effect, yeah? Who is the best placed person within that organization to speak, yeah? And what message are they carrying out there? Oftentimes we see messages that are not even meant for target groups leaking to the wrong people. And then you create actually unnecessary friction. And then lastly, brand is about perception. And you should never let your guard down at all times. You have to ensure that you never let your guard down, even in your communication and in everything that you do. So these are the two cases, and what I was trying to do is to just show the practical aspect of communication during this time in an era where there is a lot of digital communication. There are thin lines between internal and external communication, and everyone is actually a publisher. It gives actually a bigger challenge for the communication professionals, but even for every single other person who is in any organization, yeah? So how is NSSF doing during the COVID? In terms of internal communications, of course, my colleagues spoke about ensuring that people have access to platforms, online meetings as opposed to physical, using leveraging on the opportunities provided by social media, and encouraging managers to engage consistently with your teams, you know, to agree on the targets and to do the weekly status online and everything. And also having a consistent crisis committee that meets on a daily basis to pick out any issues that could actually impact the organization internally or externally. And then, of course, during the COVID time, there's also been increased, I would say, increased emphasis on the relevance of NSSF. And so what we have to do is to ensure that all our staff understand our position, that our messaging is consistent. And we've, of course, placed more emphasis on the social media and digital channels, and are also working at automating some aspects of our communication and aligning our message to the time. You know, I'll just give a small example. Before the COVID outbreak, we wanted just to run a campaign actually to step up contributions. But now with the COVID outbreak, you cannot ask people to step out contributions. So you have to align your message actually to the timing. And so we decided, let us align our message to accessing services online and offering an amnesty to the employers. So really that is the flexibility that we've already talked about. And so, like I said, I would take a very short time because I have only 6 slides. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm now ready for any questions if they are arising. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara, for that presentation. Very key points about communication being a process, and then, of course, the communication trends during post-COVID and interesting cases like the Starbucks and Black Lives Matter relationship, and of course, our local scenario here of Coca-Cola, whose donation of so much money was misread into just jerry cans for storing chemicals or water. You can see how communication can twist things. And also as you rightly mentioned, organizations and human and persons that don't take care could easily have what we call the internet mob justice. When 2-3 people start reacting to something wrong you have posted, then you could have 1,000 people, and before you know, you have 10,000 reacting to that abnormal thing that you have posted. Thanks a lot, Barbara. We will proceed, I think, at this stage to the question and answer session. There are already many questions posted on the Q&A window. We will, I don't know how you proceed, but I would think that we take a couple of these questions, and then we can have Fenard and Barbara respond to them. In the interest of order, I think I will choose some of the questions and then address to the two presenters, and then they can take on that. So if I may start, let me give opportunity to the very first question. Herman Karugaba said, how does one effectively communicate and reduce the risk of information leakages in this era of social media? And later on memo is written and even the recipient gets it, it's already, yeah, I know Barbara has already commented something on that. Could we have a comment from Fenard, please, on that question number 1? And then also there's a question, Obed Tindeva say, can Barbara contextualize the midterm issue that has been in the media for some time and how it has affected NSSF? Let's start with those and then we can take on other questions afterwards. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank Herman for the question of leaking of information to the press. I would recommend that the institutions, especially both private and public, in the public service and public institution, it's okay, but in the private sector, it's still hanging of swearing oath of secrecy. If somebody, you have sworn oath of secrecy, it becomes incumbent on you not to release information that is only for internal consumption. And there are gadgets which can, I said the most institutions should invest in IT to know who exactly has leaked such information. So there is a quest for investing in IT and for staff to swear oath of secrecy. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Fenard. Can we have Barbara then attend to the question about contextualizing the midterm issue in media for some time and how it has affected NSSF communication strategy? Barbara, there's also somebody raising concern that during the COVID period, your messages, the packaging of your messages, for example, telling members that paying out would disenfranchise non-members, explaining macroeconomics to members, etc. I believe these were gaps. What are you doing to improve these? Barbara, please, welcome.
Thank you so much. And you notice that I think we have okay, just give me 10 minutes, then I will switch the room. Thank you. I'm so sorry for the interruption. Let me just start with the first question. I had deliberately dodged using NSSF as an example because, of course, we are still reeling from the effects of the midterm. But just to put this right, midterm access is actually a conversation that has been with NSSF since the first reading of the NSSF Amendment Bill in August. As soon as the NSSF Amendment Bill was tabled in August by the Ministry of Gender, there was a provision within the bill for midterm access for voluntary contributions. And this, of course, did not go well with the various people from the unions, the workers' representatives. So the unions actually came forward and said, no, midterm access should actually be for the mandatory contribution. And this, at that time, actually was debated, and the ministry, the parliament had assigned this bill to two committees. Parliament assigned the bill to the Finance Committee and the Gender Committee. And these committees actually received a lot of feedback from the public. And one of the key things that perhaps we just needed to clarify is that NSSF is not 100% in control of actually the NSSF amendment bill. We are the beneficiaries, but we are not the authors of the bill. And so we, of course, if the bill passes, we would benefit. And so that is the context. And now when COVID broke out, increasingly, more people began to now feel insecure. And that is understandable because suddenly people were losing jobs and certain people had to take salary cuts. And of course, at that point, it was an emotional conversation. And people began to, again, revisit the conversation, which had been there since August, asking for their money. Now, where is the bill at the moment? The bill actually is in Parliament. And to be honest, the fund actually is heavily regulated. So we had to empathize with our members and tell them we are sorry, we apologize. However, the bill does not actually allow for us to make this payout. And of course, in a letter issued by our MD to the minister, there was a consideration for a blanket 20% payout to all members. And that was actually a new development, which was not even in the NSSF amendment bill. Yeah, because the bill provided for midterm access for those who had saved maybe for 10 years or who had 45 for their voluntary contribution. But now the conversation was everyone wanted a 20% midterm access, which of course the minister had to ask for an opinion, which opinion, like we said, somehow got to the wrong hands. And that is why I said that sometimes when you're communicating, there's a very thin line. Information that is meant for a different target group gets to a different target group. And then you find suddenly, Lisa, just give me 1 minute. Let me respond to this question, then I'll shift. I'm using a meeting room that is also required, but let me just answer this question. Then I'll allow the next person to answer, then I'll proceed to another meeting room.
Okay, noted.
So because of that, we actually found that there was an uproar. But we again realized that our members, we were not speaking to our members. We had talked to the minister, we had talked to the members, explained, but the members felt that we lacked empathy. And that is why we told our members, it's not that we do not support midterm access. We actually do. We realized there was a gap in our communication, and that's what we sought to address. We explained and said, we support midterm access, but the opinion that was required of us was an opinion in regard to a blanket payout, which actually we had to give a professional opinion about. And so that really is the context for the midterm access conversation. And I know sometimes one of the things that I pointed out is that it's important for you as a brand to be consistent in your communication. And that is why, even though it was unpopular to tell people that we do not have the act, which was the truth actually, to support this payout, we had to maintain that consistency. Thank you so much. I'll hand over the next and then proceed to shift my meeting room.
Okay, thanks a lot, Barbara. We move back to Fenard. Fenard, there are two questions I want you to respond to. Just to the members, please, I'm selecting these questions randomly. I hope that this does not matter. And if your question is not selected, please, I don't put on party colors, not yellow, not red, not anything. So it's not discrimination. It's just, there's a question from Sheila Kasuja. She says communication is a vital tool in day-to-day work of a manager. In most cases, information is disfigured, disoriented, not reported well to the final receiver. What's your comment on this? Fenard, you'll respond to that. And also the second question from Ronald Toko, he says, to ensure effective communication, there is need for organizations to develop communication strategy, which is lacking in many. Even those that have it have been caught off guard by the COVID-19 pandemic. What is your advice to organizations concerning development of communication strategy? So Fenard, could you please attend to these two questions, please? Thank you.
Thank you. For the question of Sheila about disfigured information, you refer to the sender. When the information is not clear, that is not information. You need to refer to the sender, the one who has originated the information for clarity. If the information is not clear and precise, that is not good communication. In respect of Mr. Toko about communication strategy, Ministry of Information of ICT and National Guidance urged all government institutions to develop communication strategy. Now, so I would urge if those institutions that have not even set up the communication strategies to formulate one. Then there should be rider statements that in the event that this one happens, this should take place. So in the communication strategy, once well designed, it will come out clearly to state some of the unstated and some of the unwritten rules and some of the psychological controls. Basically, that is that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. We have Barbara ready now. Barbara, are you set?
Yes, I am. I'm set.
Okay, let me give you two more questions.
Okay.
Your colleague has been answering some too. There's someone by the name Edson Sabimana. He says, how best can staff working from home be supervised? What kind of security do we need when working from home? And I think that question is related to Josephine Osia's question, which says, what are some of the practical ways of measuring productivity of staff working remotely? Okay. So Barbara, could you attend to these two questions, please?
Thank you so much. And I'm glad to hear that Josephine is online. But just to answer about how effective can staff work from home and how can we as managers ensure that staff are actually very effective. I'll just use my own example. The first thing is to agree on the deliverables. You know, sit down with your team and agree and say, within this period, what can we actually deliver immediately? What can we deliver within the next 1, 2, 3 weeks? And if you do that, you have clarity on what the person is supposed to do. So the first thing is agree on the deliverables. The second thing is agree on when you can have review meetings to actually ensure that this work is being done. And depending on what timelines work for you, a week works for me. So on a weekly basis, I meet my team and then agree and see whether what we agreed on has actually been delivered. And then of course, using the structures that you have, because for example, you might have actually a department and you have a head of department, but you have line managers. So when you engage at the department level, you also need to engage within actually the existing structures so that there would be more engagements even at the line managers level. And also another thing that has worked for me is really exploiting the opportunities presented by social media. You know, it's very easy to chat and follow up on something even after the weekly meeting. So And also to ensure that despite the fact that you are using social media for work, to ensure that the tone of your communication remains inviting so that staff still feel free within that social media to actually air out other opinions on other things, so that at the end of the day, you are actually ensuring that they're working effectively, but you're also maintaining the team cohesion that is required actually, so that people still feel like they are one, even when they are not together. I think that answers the first question. Kindly repeat, but I think there were similar questions.
Yes, measuring effectiveness for homework. I think that was the second question.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. We revert back to Fenard again. Fenard, there is someone by the name David Musoke. He says, should organizations which are well into remote working start to rethink some of the office space infrastructure? That is question number one for you. Should organizations which are well into remote working start to rethink some of the office space infrastructure? Then another question from Kasim. Kasim Sada has posted several things, but I'll choose one of them. Name the risk in terms of information transmission and outcome after the communication. Name the risks in terms of information transmission and outcome after the communication. Fenard, please, there you go.
Thank you, Chair. In respect of office space infrastructure, in Kampala here, at least you see a minimum rent space is about $6, for example. So you are renting, let's say 100 square meters. Because of COVID space, you can be the organization can save when it rents 50 square meters, because most of the offices will be empty. So institutions and organizations need to rethink on how to cut costs, and cutting costs is also cutting on the office space that has been rented out. So that one has to be sorted, because we are embracing for harder times. And for institutions and organizations to break even, they must cut costs. So cutting costs on office space will also have to be looked into by different institutions. Risk of transmission. Of course, information, we have a challenge. You don't know, there is you have not the one who has received the information. We have a challenge of confidentiality. You don't know where is forwarding it to, even our own internal intra-communication. You send out communication, but somebody, those people with the third arm, you find that he has forwarded it to a wrong element or to somebody who is not supposed to be a recipient. So all this comes to trust. Institutions are our second homes. If you take an institution or your office as a third home, and you want also to make sure that whatever you do, you break it down, you will be breaking your own home. So we need to have the issue of trust. We need to build trust. We need to build trust among our staff and among our people to make sure that they know that they own the institution. That's all, Chair.
Thanks a lot, Fenard. I filled 2 more questions for Barbara. Barbara, we have Jamil Kasirivu is saying, hello, Barbara. How can someone align his or her personal communication with communications of organization on social media platform? How can one align his or her personal communication with communication of the organization on social media platform? And then we have another question from Avaga Michael. I hope I'm pronouncing that name, Avaga, well. How do we address the managers misinforming or giving confusing information to the employees or the subjects, hence leading to mistakes? What should the employees or the subjects do? My assumption is that this confusing information is a mistake, not an intention. There are people like connecting wires to spark in the workplace by sending conflicting communication sometimes, but I do hope that this is not that kind, but rather it's a normal thing. Please, Barbara.
Okay, thank you. Let me start with aligning your personal communication on social media with the organization. Of course, a part of this responsibility rests with the organization. Organizations must have a social media policy that defines staff usage of social media and how staff should actually behave when on social media. Why? Because like we said earlier, every staff is a brand ambassador for the respective organization. So if a staff member decides to, let's say, post something that is irregular and not aligned to the brand of that organization, it impacts on the organization. So the first thing to manage this is, first of all, the social media policy for the respective organization. Now, as an individual, you also need to understand that it's not just about you, but your personal brand. And so how you're managing your social media accounts in isolation reflects a lot on you. And especially if you have plans for your life, you need to ensure that you do not post just anything on social media. Now, how do you tie in the two? If, let's say, my organization posts something, let's say we have a post and say, we have this new offer coming up. As a staff member, I can actually go and support that and maybe retweet it if I'm on Twitter, or share it on Facebook and tag people. So at the end of the day, you get to create more awareness for what your organization is doing. And also there are instances whereby you might find that you are in a position where you have to clarify an issue on behalf of your organization using your own social media accounts. But for us as the fund, usually the way we manage that is that we tell staff that you are not authorized to speak on behalf of the fund. So it's someone who gives their opinion, makes it very clear that that is their personal opinion in regard to that matter. So of course, that is really how we look at managing the link between personal social media accounts and the organization social media accounts. Now, there was a question about how to address managers who deliberately give wrong information. And I think Mr. Mwaka rightly put that it wouldn't be the interest of any manager to deliberately give wrong information. However, I think from a point of view from really a CEO's perspective, communication should be agreed and shared and ensure, it should be made clear to all heads of department that this is the position, even if it's a matter pertaining to staff or if it's a matter pertaining to an issue. This opinion is then endorsed by the CEO in our organization. That's what happens. And this information is now the official position. So let's say if it's, let's say, a new appraisal tool, it is approved by EXCO and that is the position. So every manager knows that this is the communication, and a standard communication is availed for them that they can share with their team. So in the event someone didn't understand, it's easier for them to use the standard communication that has already been availed for them to actually escalate it downwards to their team. That is how you can manage such a situation where there is a formal procedure for communicating and things are written and documented and shared across the board. That is the only way you can manage misrepresentations. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Barbara, for those responses. Now we revert back to Fenard again. Fenard, there are two questions that I would like to address to you. One is from Andrew Maweje. He says, how will those in business already and startups with little cash meet the requirements for effective communication? And what can be the alternatives to deliver the same effective communication? He says, how will those already in business and startups, these are entrepreneurs just starting business and they have little cash, how can they meet the requirements for effective communication? And what are alternatives they can use? to deliver the same effective communication. Then we have someone by the name Thomas Venture, who says, in this era, should organizations plan to prepare appropriate procedures to handle their new way of working? We can't rely on previous policies that have been overtaken by events. And who should lead the process? Yeah, I repeat, in this era, should organizations plan to prepare appropriate procedures to handle the new way of working? We can't rely on previous procedures and policies that have been overtaken by events. And who should lead this process? Fenard, please.
The second question is not clear, but the first question is about communication. Whether big or small, any communication between more than two people needs to be received. So whether you are a big organization, whether you are a small organization, the issue of how should which information should be given to the public, what the information that needed to be shared among the stakeholders, what is the information that needs to be shared among the staff has to be clearly articulated. Once there are clear lines on how the information is supposed to be articulated and shared to the external public, it becomes more clear that all, even if it is an institution, a company of two people or one person. So how do you communicate? You need to state the strategies of how you communicate the information. Is it private? Is it confidential? Does it talk about finances? So there must be the clear terms of how that information is supposed to be put in place. The second question was not clear. I needed to be to repeat it such that I respond to it.
Yeah, sorry. The second question is from sorry. Just a minute. Let me just refer back to that question. Sorry, I can't see that question, but it's talking about change in policies because of the new normal. Should policies change because of the new working scenario we have now? Say,
because you see,
and who should steer these changes in policies and procedures?
Through several addresses by His Excellency the President, he has been mentioning the issue of standard operating procedures. In the government institutions, the Office of the Prime Minister and the Leader of Government Business offers those standard operating procedures in line and in consultation with other ministries. Now, in the private sector, of course, there are other umbrella organizations. Here in Kampala, we have CASITA, we have Uganda Manufacturers Association, the National Chamber of Commerce, the Private Sector Foundation. Those ones, once the leader of the government business has set procedures, those ones also can just opt to make sure they suit their environment under which they operate. Basically, that is that, Chairman.
Thanks.
But Chair,
yes.
Through the question, there are two questions which I felt that I should answer.
Yes,
one
please. Please go ahead.
By Mr. Chom about remote working in education institutions, and the one by Mr. Vincent Sonko about staff bosses who no longer meet. For the issue of education institutions in villages, Ministry of Education has got standard operating procedures of how those things, how the remote working, the issue of private radios, the proposed TV programs, and the issue of newspapers. Ministry of Education, there is a way how it is going to answer them. Then about Mr. Vincent Sonko, about staff and bosses who no longer meet as before, what would be the key successful for remote working? What could be key successful remote team relationship? The issue of Zoom, the issue of Skype, staff Skype, the issue of telephone calls, the issue of people should know where even some of our staff stay. You might be staying with a colleague and he says, I stay in Kaerwe, but when he's staying in Makerere. So if there is a need for staff to know where we stay, such that we bond. There is life after 5. We need that bondage. and even making a phone call, you might find that you don't have even a phone call of your colleague. So we need to know our telephone numbers of our colleague. And second, like this time, like during COVID, some of our staff were being dropped at their places of residence. Others were hiding where they stay. So we need to know where our staff stand. In case, in the event of any issue, then I know X stays in Kororo, but he has been lying to me that he stays in Karebe. So we need to have those characters. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, your comments have made me look at one of the questions. Is an interesting scenario. You mentioned that some people would hide their residences. They don't want their colleagues to know. I do hope that no professional accountant will hide his residence from his colleagues. Then there's someone by the name Morris Marajto, who says, Fenard, working remotely is becoming a challenge practically to employees because they equally do not have other basic working tools in their homes. Imagine a home without an office chair, table, or even created space for working. These must be the reasons which are hidden from colleagues, I believe. A home without an office chair, table, or created working space, or those who stay in a single room, for example. Don't you think this can equally affect the work output, and how can an organization handle that? Fenard, could you respond to that? It's similar to what you've just been explaining, please.
There is one statement which I can make members know. When the right honorable speaker is pronouncing, for example, during the budget speech, he says, we are let's say sitting at the Serena Hotel, and they also co-opt the gardens. So even us, we need to have those proclamations. Say now, my bedroom, I am in one bedroom house. My floor is going to be where I sit. I'm going to be converted into an office. So it depends on how you have designed yourself. So it is the working environment. It's how you turn the working environment. Not all of us sleep in comfortable, but at least productivity. You know where the computer or the press you are holding is where you are going to get the milk, is where you are going to your rent. So you have to make sure that you operate within the available facilities. Then secondly, of course, we have the challenge of network. Network is becoming a challenge, and it's even in Kampala, in the CBD, it's a network challenge. So institutions, as I have mentioned in my presentation, there is a need now, like now the financial year is coming to an end, there is a need now to focus on IT equipment. You want me to produce a report from home, but I don't have internet, I don't have even a laptop. So institutions and organizations and companies need to invest more in IT equipment for productivity, because their performance plans, which you have agreed upon with your supervisor and the organization. So for them to be fulfilled, you have to be facilitated. So organizations should facilitate their staff for productive work. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I think we'll field 2 more questions, which Barbara will respond to. It's already 12:39. We will have to close in a couple of minutes, I believe. I don't know whether ICPAU has some updates or any information to give to the members. But let's take 2 more questions first. We have Joseph Bachbinga, who says, how do you mitigate the risk of missing out on nonverbal communication in a remote working environment? How do you mitigate the risk of missing out on nonverbal communication in a remote working environment? And then I take another question from Michael Kimoni. Mike, this must be EY, I believe. How do you balance between the various communication channels to achieve effective communication? How do you balance between the various communication channels to achieve effective communication? Barbara, could you attend to these 2 questions, please? Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Perhaps just before I respond to those 2 questions, I just wanted to say that just to add my voice to Fenard's submission and say that if working from home becomes the new normal, then of course we will need to have policies in place. Because at the moment, we do not have policies that actually protect workers and define home as a work environment. So if actually this becomes the new normal and organizations begin to look at things like saving rent, office space rent, then organizations would also, and I think it would be a role for the HR practitioners to actually come up with policies, how to ensure that staff work from home in a regulated environment, something that defines things that at the moment are a little fuzzy, and to clarify on all those gray areas. So I think someone asked about that. I do think we shall need policies if this becomes the new normal. And then because you can see even, I think in Sweden, someone sued and was rewarded actually rent because they said the organization actually is utilizing their home and they're not contributing to their rent. So in order to avoid such scenarios, organizations will have to look into policies. Secondly, there is a question that Joseph asked about mitigating the risk of non-verbal communication in a remote environment. Now, of course, risk is a way of life, and when you know that there's a risk, then you can manage it. If you know that you need to actually be able to pick out the non-verbal communication, then what you need to do is to ensure that perhaps you arrange for a one-on-one on Zoom and activate the video so that you can see the expressions of your team members, instead, because at this point you might not be in position to actually visit them. So that's a way you can mitigate. If you want the non-verbal, perhaps do a visual, video call and you would be able to mitigate that. And then there's the last question on balancing channels to achieve effective communication. Now, first of all, like we said, communication is a process. You need to define your context. You need to agree on your communication objective. You need to know who you are communicating to. Now, when you have selected your target group, you will then be in position to select the communication channels, yeah? So let's assume that the fund wants to communicate maybe to members who are 55 years old and above, yeah? Already, if the fund decided to use digital media, we already have a profile of our customers on digital. We know that predominantly they're between basically 20 and 34 years old. And those are the people who are always actively contacting NSSF on social media. So we will not definitely opt for that channel when our target group is perhaps someone who is supposed to be receiving their NSSF. We'll opt for the traditional channels. And again, that is informed by data that we have. So the choice of a channel and balancing between channels actually is really something that is hinged on the target group that you want to relay this message to. And in a nutshell, really, that is what it is. And I think that is all I have to say about that. If you know your target group, you can select your channels very appropriately. But you also need to have information on the usability. Who is using those channels? What time are they logged on? If you have that, you can easily plan your media strategy very carefully when you have your target group and information about the performance usage of the respective channels. Thank you.
Okay, Barbara, one more question, last question I want you to respond to. As someone by the name George Willis, it says, Madam Barbara, you talked about staff being should be brand ambassadors. What's your take on downsizing that is happening in many organizations, please?
Oh, wow. It's very unfortunate. It's really very unfortunate that organizations have to downsize. And my take is, one, it's unfortunate. Two, if it really must happen, then there should be an appropriate, really appropriate strategy that is followed. People should call the staff, engage them, and explain what is happening, and be able to offer them at least something for really a take-home package. And that is really if the worst comes to the worst. But for you to just terminate staff without explaining to them, you can expose the organization to actually cases. People can sue the organization, and then you're in court. You have so many cases to follow up. And of course, your brand will suffer at that point. But if it is done in a way that people actually arrive at a win-win, you know, where the staff does not just go like that, they've not done anything, but it's just that maybe your company has lost business and maybe it's shutting down, then you have no other option but to take that hard decision. So it's unfortunate, but when it has to be done, it has to be done in the right way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, members. It's 14 minutes to 1. We are meant to close at 1, and I believe that we have taken enough time. We will give some time to ICPAU at this stage to do some housekeeping and possibly conclude, see how to conclude this. I know this is a strange environment. We don't have time to take photos and offer certificates for presentation online.
Yeah,
It's quite a new environment. Yeah, 14 minutes, and I can promise you that ICPAU will not deduct the 14 minutes remaining from your CPD certificate, please. Is someone from ICPAU ready to take on now? Is someone available from the Institute, please?
Thank you, Clayton. On behalf of the Institute, I would like to thank you for chairing this session and thank Barbra and Fenard for taking us through today's webinar. It has been very insightful, and I believe the members have picked a lot of lessons. We have upcoming webinars, taxation of business income next Wednesday, 21st June 2020. We also have public finance management and reporting on 26th June 2020. So make sure you book and attend those webinars. They are free. But I want to alert the members that soon we shall be making a modest contribution towards these seminars, the webinars. With those few remarks, I once again thank our presenters and the chair for steering us through this session, and wish the members a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks.